So by way of intro, I'm Allan Naim. I'm on the product management team at Google. I work on Google Kubernetes Engine. And these days I've been spending most of my time working on how to bring Google Kubernetes Engine outside of Google Cloud, primarily on-premise.
Hi, and I'm Grace. I'm a cloud solutions architect, and as part of my role, I get to talk to lots of customers, and I'm looking for repeating patterns that I can then figure out how to share those learnings by solutions and tutorials. Okay, so Allan, I'm here to actually talk to you about why customers are moving to the cloud. Okay, so I'm going to talk about a subset of our customers, financial services customers. So why are they moving to the cloud? It's not because it's a fad, it's because they've got some solid reasons, as you can see, as to why they'd want to do this. So one of the key ones, fresh out the door, tends to be agility. I sit down and they start saying they want to be more agile. They want their developers to be able to experiment without them having to kind of invest in upfront CapEx. They're also, in a lot of cases, their network isn't actually designed for global collaboration and global delivery. So obviously they think, oh, the cloud will help them to do that. And obviously with the scale of GCP, that will obviously help them. And then they've got, over the time, they've had lots of problems with single points of failure because the way things have developed. So they're thinking about how they can actually provide better availability. And because when you design for the cloud, we actually kind of encourage you to think about failures up front because things fail all the time. And then there's the cost optimization, which they also are kind of key. So some of the workloads this subset think about are risk and regulatory reporting. They've got more and more data and rules that they need to comply with, so they want to do lots of analytics and big data type crunching. So things they need to prove that they're actually doing as they say. Then there's financial risk modeling, lots of CPU, and they're also always developing new consumer applications.
So Grace, you're out there talking to a lot of customers and having conversations around their cloud journey. Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing out there?
I knew you were going to ask that. Okay, so as being financial services, one of the first thing out the door is regulations. Okay, they're global, so not only have they got to adhere with regulations for local regions, but also global regulations. And as well as just regulations, I speak to all the teams that have an influence and actually use the platform. So let's have a look at what the infrastructure teams tend to require. They have locality concerns as well. So two types is the workload. Some of the workloads can be run on premises, some can be run on the cloud. In addition to that, they've got where can your data be? They want to be able to classify their data because they can, some places they just cannot move that data to the cloud. And even when it gets to the cloud, it's like, oh, hang on a minute, where in the cloud can it be? So they want to actually pin it to a region. And you know, when that data moves up, they also want to be able to de-identify it. They're also very, very concerned about the fact that they've got to run their operations across a hybrid platform. So they're worried about the technical complexity of that. So I spoke earlier about the single points of failure. So it's all about business continuity. Okay. So the fact that they want their infrastructure and their application interfaces to be designed and built for resiliency. And also they want to make sure that their calls to those interfaces are authenticated and authorized. They want to have logical separation. They want to be able to distinguish between workloads and team projects. Okay. Then they want guardrails. Basically, they want to be able to propagate rules from the organization downwards without getting in the way of their developers. So they want to mitigate against potential human error. They want to actually stop ne'er-do-wells having unauthorized access. And they want to be able to get signals for all of this. They want to be able to monitor that hybrid architecture, whether it be on platform or on-prem or in the cloud. Sorry, yeah. And there's consistency of the infrastructure and the policies that apply across both platforms. The security team have also got very similar requirements as well. They also want to be able to classify data, and they have issues around where certain data should be. They want to be able to integrate their security controls as part of their pipeline deployment, be that whether it's infrastructure as code to actually deploy to the actual infrastructure, or whether it's application codes. They want those controls to be part of, and see as part of that deployment, and they want it to be a first-class citizen. Data integrity, they want to make sure there's secure access to data. And they also want to prevent, one thing there's a common ask is like, okay, once we've got our data in the cloud, can we prevent it being modified for a set period of time? Auditing. Again here, they want to be, the actual act of auditing shouldn't change anything, forensic auditing. And they obviously being able to track who's doing what on their platform is key. Separation of duty, least privilege, it's actually two sides of the same coin. It's all about permissions. So if you think about the fact that you have a central security or network team, that infers you don't want other teams to have the ability to change your firewall rules or other security controls. So it's making sure people have the permissions they need to do their job and not over-permissioning. Organization-wide policies, that's essentially the guardrails the infrastructure team talked about. And of course, there's developers, all right? So developers, as we said, they want to be more agile. We want to improve the speed of deployment. And one of the things that's come up about this is the fact that people are starting to adopt microservices because it allows you to work on bits of your application with using different teams, and they don't get in each other's ways because they can actually independently update that service. They can independently scale. And Kubernetes has been seen as a way to do that because you can run it on-prem, you can run it in another cloud, you can run it on us. Separation of duty, again, that's all about who can do what. And here they're really concerned about separating out the operational requirements from the development requirements. Okay. Logical separation here is isolation between environments, and that can mean between different services, or it can mean between dev, prod, and QA. And then there's isolation between those workloads and services. Developers, they love CI/CD tooling. So one of the things that they want is to actually have the same tooling deployed to whichever platform, be that on-premise or on the cloud. And they want consistency. They want to be able to have one way of signaling through auditing the information, logging, and alerting. And we're hoping that you're going to be able to actually help us unblock some of these.
These are pretty big shoes to fill. So what better way to truly understand, all these various requirements that Grace has walked through than to actually hear it from a customer directly? And I have the privilege of inviting Rajay Rai from Macquarie Bank to come up on stage and talk about how they've accomplished some of these challenges. So, I've been working with Rajay here for a couple of months, and I've been super impressed at just the level of agility that his teams have brought across the entire organization, helping their teams to be able to deploy upwards between 60 to 100 deploys per day, and that's fantastic. So Rajay, without further ado, walk us through the journey.
Thank you very much, Alan. So today I'm going to take you through a high-level view of what we do in Macquarie Bank. And before that, let me just quickly take you through who Macquarie Bank is. So Macquarie Bank has a presence in about 27 countries. We are a global bank and one of the largest infrastructure managers, in fact, one of the largest infrastructure asset managers in the world. We have over about 15,000 employees in Macquarie. There are 5 key divisions in Macquarie. I work in banking and financial services, which is the retail arm of the business. I look after digital engineering in the bank at the moment. So we are a digital bank, which means we have no branches. Absolutely no branches. The only branch we have right now is one branch, which is in Shelley Street in Sydney. That's where our head office is. About 4.5, 5 years ago, we started a journey. And when we started a journey, our objective was to create highly consumable interactions for our customers. How do we do that? How do we take complex data and make them more consumable and more meaningful for our customers? That was the idea. There's an example here. This is my account, actually, where you could go and say, using natural language search capabilities, you could say, how much do I spend in golf around Wahroonga? I play a lot of golf. And you can see there, we have proximity-based search. And if I have a bad day, I end up in Thornley, which is on your left. There's a red dot there. That's where I go and kind of try and improve my swing. On the left side, we've got an example of insights, oversights, and foresights. About 4 years ago, we didn't have a mobile presence. Today we do. And it's a leading experience at the moment in Australia. I mentioned we are a digital bank, and we are also providing white label solutions for clients. We have over around 50 different channels that we support today. That tells you the complexity, the level of complexity that we have to face in managing our entire ecosystem. I'll wind back to about 5 years ago. This is where we were. I'm sure all of you can relate to this. Active passive infrastructure, and would take us about 6 to 8 hours to deploy. Mutable infrastructure, you can see that there. Lots of monolithic applications. It took us a while. And then we said, if we are to be a digital bank, there's no way we could survive in a world where everything is changing constantly. So we're all living in the fourth industrial revolution, where we know that it's all about the fast that beats the slow. And connectivity is the new royalty. So how do you ship software in minutes? That's really, really important. As an organization, we need to find a way to help the organization move faster, and your software has to be shippable. How do we do that? This is how we've done this. This is the evolution that we've been on. Right from the left side, you will see we started with monolithic applications, moved on to microservices. After that, we moved all our data to a data platform, which I'll explain in more detail in the next slide. Experimentation is important. In order to be really innovative, you've got to be able to learn and innovate fast. Hence, we'll talk about that in terms of architecture. How do we align with that? How do we complement what the business wants to do? Cloud was important. Moving to the cloud was fundamental for us. And of course, with all of this, we were the first bank in Australia to publish open APIs. And we did this early last year. That's the pace of innovation that we have at the moment. So we went from having the ability to sequentially release, which is maybe once in a month or once in 3 months, to something like 60 to 100 releases a day. And we do this actively in production. I'll talk a little more about that. Our UIs would take roughly 30 seconds to deploy, and I can tell you about that as well. This is our current state architecture today. From the bottom, we've got the system of record, where we're publishing all our events to a layer above. And then that's where your enterprise data is, deep down in the enterprise. Above that, we have internet enterprise data, which is stored in a data store layer, all running on Kubernetes. This is where we have Cassandra, Spark, Solar, Elasticsearch, Kafka, in-memory data stores, Spark for in-memory processing. Data has no end and no beginning right now, so it cannot fit in memory. So we've got to find a way to process this continuously. We have Redis as well, and we consciously made a decision to run all our data services in a separate cluster. And the reason is very simple. You have different challenges when you think about networks. You have node IPs that need to be exposed. You have to think about backup strategies. How do you do that at scale using Arc? You got terabytes and terabytes of data. How do you do that? You got to think differently. In fact, we started a journey 3 years ago. So we've been investing upstream with various technologies and strategies through partners to enable us to do this at scale. We also have graph databases that we use for Customer 360 and permissions and entitlements that we have. Above that layer, you've got the digital services, our stateless applications. We've separated the concerns. We're constantly rebuilding our applications from source. Our platforms are torn down every 60 days. We have to roll it over. And with that, we have to roll all the traffic over. So if you're supporting, imagine if you're supporting more than 50 different channels, it's a highly complex exercise to have all this done in a unified manner. So we have the API management gateway, which is Apigee. We've been partnering with Google for a long time now, almost 4 years with Apigee. And the traffic shaping is done from the Apigee layer on top. And above that, we've got open endpoint independence, which means we believe in co-creating value in the ecosystem. That's the reason why we published open APIs. And we have a single strategy for all our consumers. It's OpenID Connect with OAuth 2. And you can see there we have other consumers as well. We have Salesforce, which is our internal client, our internal staff is using that for customer support. New partners. We also have our partners building their own experiences with our APIs. And we have to do this at scale with all our services changing continuously, multiple times a day. How do we do that? So we have fairly, an outside-in based architecture approach with everything we do. We think about customers first and then start building our solutions. Now, because we have this architecture, which is on the cloud, running on Kubernetes, we can spin up multiple environments. Every developer can have an end-to-end environment. And you can see there, we snap all your data that's being published and all the events that are coming through almost in real time. We split that up and we can create an end-to-end environment saying, hey, only our digital engineers can access this area. So we control the blast radius of the access in that area. And it's all live in production, right? So it's like saying I got a mini production environment running and I can have a few of these running depending on the features that we are trying to build, because this is all about accelerating our path to production. Now, I believe Netflix published some kind of a paper on this, and they call this forklifting, if I'm not mistaken. Then, once you're happy with that, we move over to beta. Beta is where we constantly, working with our partners. We're working with our internal staff, and of course, we invite external clients to also come and comment and give us feedback continuously. Lastly, of course, once that's done, we can move to production. So this is really important. This is a strategy, that's the secret sauce that makes us successful when we have to innovate really fast. Coming to how we did this, I'll quickly tell you about how we've implemented this and how we industrialized Kubernetes. So we got Kubernetes running, of course, and where do you draw? You have to think in terms of where do you draw the line between what a platform team should be doing and what the product team should be doing. So of course, you have Kubernetes. If you had just one or two teams, you wouldn't have to worry too much about shipping software out. But if you have, let's say, about 40 teams like we do, and over hundreds and hundreds of developers, you have to think differently about how do you industrialize this. We are a highly regulated environment. We are regulated. We have obligations for regulators. Hence, we have to make sure that everything is traced and audited. So we use GitOps. All our governance-related parameters and metadata are stored in Git. And if you guys are not aware of GitOps, have a search on the internet and you'll learn a lot more about it. It's a very interesting topic. Essentially, we can store all our metadata in Git, and you can have approvals and everything done using Git itself. So this is where you have permissions based on, hey, this is the structure of the team. Within this team, this is the release manager, this is the approver, this is how you get stuff into production. If you're a release manager, you can only get stuff into production using the Jira. You can't go and deploy it from anywhere else. You have to have security boundaries drawn up very clearly. And this is why you have to look at guardrails that are really important. It could be detective, could be preventive. You have to think about that. Another thing that really challenged us when we went into the Kubernetes route was you end up with 15x density, right? Everybody is deploying software in development, in test, and you are running over capacity all the time. So you have to manage your capacity, you have to manage the expiry of these namespaces, and that itself is a challenge. We have user access reviews, which are, again, being regulated, we have to produce all of that. Now, moving further up, you think in terms of secret management. At the moment, we have a strategy for managing our secrets and our certificates that's homegrown, and we're now moving towards HashiCorp Vault. If you had 50 ways of doing this, you would not be able to industrialize this. It would be a nightmare. So what we do is we have a standard pattern in place. We have standard APIs in place that delivers this for us. So for us to shift over to the Vault would be really, really very simple. Another good example here would be how do you handle vulnerabilities? We practice SecDevOps. Our security team are building all the APIs on top of all the scanners, and they handle all the false positives. As you all know, it's a nightmare thinking in terms of how do you manage false positives. It's almost impossible to do that. So we do that ourselves, and our entire ecosystem, we built our entire ecosystem on top of Kubernetes to enable us to do this at speed and scale. As you move up, as I move up, this is what we're trying to say here. We try to absorb all the responsibilities from the developers, right? All the platform-related responsibilities. Anything that we're repeating, if we are doing anything once or twice, we try and, if it's repeatable, we try and absorb that into the platform. About 98% of the patterns that we have are all reusable. So here you see the lines going further and further up, and we want to move the line of innovation closer and closer to the developers. So they only have one job and one job alone, and that is to create world-class experiences for our customers. And the last thing I'd like to say there is, when you think in terms of scale here, and we are constantly moving our clusters, recreating them, you got to bleed the traffic over to the latest services. So what we do is match. Our platform allows us to match clusters, match namespaces, match services within clusters using synthetics. And then once we're ready, we flick the traffics across. So this is happening continuously during the day. In fact, we do not do any releases at night. We do it live. Everything we do is live. As a bank, it's quite challenging to get there, but we've got there because we're on the cloud today. So the next thing I'd like to say here is this is an example, a quick example of how we route our traffic. We have, let's say, white label partners building their own solutions, using version 1.5, version 1.8 of all our services and APIs. You'd have Macquarie Bank pointing to 1.7. And let's say you had a bug. You would say, I want to create 1.8. You're going to drop that in. It'll take you about 5 minutes. What we do is build products, a namespace related to a product. So let's say you got personal banking namespace. You'd have a wealth namespace, an identity namespace, a business banking namespace, and so on and so forth. And you'll find most of the time, your applications, your architecture, your topology of your namespaces will always reflect the way you build your software in the organization. And it's a fact. You will be doing that. And if you do that, it's a challenge. But we'll come to that challenge as well. Now, what we do here is also, you could just drop in or change any microservice here. What we prefer to do is move them as a set, or as a product through the entire life cycle, from development right through to integration, unit testing, and production, lab and production. Our new features, as I mentioned before, we have no limit to the number of nodes you want to create. We have multiple clusters. We have different clusters for different purposes, enterprise services, legacy applications. We have digital services, stateful, stateless, you name it, we have it. And we have multiple such environments, and we have to do this constantly. So, having said that, we're now releasing to production almost 60 to 100 times a day. So what does it mean for us? What's next for us? And this is interesting. We have spent a lot of effort in the past 3 years managing Kubernetes. It's not an easy task. It's not for the faint-hearted. And we've also been curating from upstream and bringing it in. We're actually working with partners upstream, and it's a challenge for us. What we want to do is outsource all this responsibility to Google. We want to make sure that we are focusing wholly and solely on one thing alone, which is building business value for our customers and our partners. Now, if you think about what next for us, I talked about how we are building our software today. It's fairly siloed. We have products, right? And let's say you have business banking, wealth, and personal banking. And now you want to start creating services that can be shared. This is where the challenge comes. So you build a namespace and you say this is the payment gateway for all the products. And then you start thinking in terms of, hey, I need to worry about the service-to-service interactions. I need to start thinking about east-west interactions rather than north-south. That's what we do a lot. We have a lot of API API. We use a lot of the API gateway with the authentication and authorization. What also happens in our current state architecture is we happen to have all sorts of patterns of authentication and authorization spanned across all our services. We have defense by depth, of course, but just to manage that is a huge overhead. A lot of automation goes in, a lot of energy goes in. We expend a lot of effort in trying to do this efficiently. So we would love to have one control plane. We'd love to simplify that entire architecture so we can enable our teams to morph into more feature-based development. We want the flexibility to move faster and faster. And we believe that that's slowing us down at the moment. So we are excited to be working with Google and, what's it called again? It's Anthos. I'm still getting used to it. It just got announced today, so I remember it as CSP. So excited to work with Google on this. We are hoping that, you continue to curate technology from upstream, bring it to us, make it enterprise grade and enterprise ready, and we can focus on what we do best, which is building the business value for our customers. Lastly, I'd like to say that, we at Macquarie continue to aspire to dream in months, plan in days, and ship in minutes. I'm around here after this meeting. If there's any other questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rajay. So we designed Anthos really to cater to the needs of enterprise customers like Macquarie. So the example that Rajay walked through is very much the area that we're looking at addressing with Anthos, so that as customers, you can outsource a lot of the complexities associated with managing these environments and being able to implement centralized governance across environments that are very heterogeneous in nature, but do it in a way that's predictable and consistent. That's really what Anthos is about. So today we announced Anthos. It's the latest innovation from Google. It's around hybrid and multi-cloud computing. It's for modernizing applications, automating policy, and it provides you security at scale. And it'll run on-prem, in Google Cloud, and other clouds. So part of the challenge with hybrid traditionally has been, hybrid is complex, right? When you start thinking about deploying applications across multiple environments, you start addressing challenges around operational overhead and cost, because you're having to use many different tools and bring in people of different skill sets. And it's not just about the technology, it's about the people and process, right? That's complicated in terms of how you make all that happen. Kubernetes did a really good job at abstracting away the underlying infrastructure, and we're all happy about that. Just show of hands, how many people out here are using Kubernetes? That's awesome. And Kubernetes has done a very good job there. But as you start building more and more containerized applications and exposing services, and services that live on-prem, in the cloud, on other clouds, how do you manage all these interactions? How do you implement a preventive policy across who can do what and what applications are allowed to do across this environment? These are really hard things to do. And then getting started with Kubernetes, typically, cloud providers do a very good job at providing managed Kubernetes implementations. But what if you have to get started outside of cloud, right? There's 10, 20, 30 distributions out there. Each is different. Well, what if you had an ability to get a Google-supported Google distribution of Kubernetes, which is Google Kubernetes Engine, and pretty much run it anywhere, starting with on-prem? And that's what we've done with Anthos. We've provided a GKE on-prem distribution that you can run in your data centers that's fully consistent with GKE in the cloud, so that you can build applications for one environment and be able to run them anywhere. And then let's not forget about operations, right? The day two experience, right? The ability to be able to define central policy and apply these policies across all of your cluster environments in a consistent fashion. Rajay mentioned the whole notion of GitOps, right? This is our goal with Anthos. It's really to drive the GitOps model so you can check your policy and config into Git and have them applied deterministically across your cluster environments, regardless of where they're running. And then we're providing a centralized monitoring and logging framework via Stackdriver and Prometheus for your entire operations for your hybrid environment as well. So let's talk about how GCP and Anthos can help you. Grace, you started off the presentation talking about all the challenges that you're seeing out there. So let's walk through these challenges and talk about how we address them. So Grace started off talking about regulation, right? Customers operate in a very regulated environment. Google Cloud has achieved independent verification of security, privacy, and compliance controls, achieving certification against global standards. So that's done. Now let's talk about infrastructure requirements. So Anthos enables platform operators to consistently run and centrally manage their Kubernetes clusters across on-prem and the cloud. This includes GKE on-prem that I just talked about, which is a GKE distribution that runs on-premise. On top of that, Anthos provides centralized management for your Kubernetes clusters and services. Now, these services could be container-based, or you could have a virtual machine that has an Envoy proxy that now becomes part of the service mesh. But you now have the ability to centrally manage this environment across on-prem and public cloud. And the important thing is reducing the operational overhead of operating across this hybrid environment. That's key. That's been one of the biggest adoption blockers, is the complexity and the operational costs. Our aim is to reduce that. For applications that have data sensitivity and locality concerns, Google Cloud's data loss prevention API can be used to classify data to ensure that it remains or gets sent where it's allowable. So we have sessions this week on the DLP API. Highly recommend you check into that, and there's also a booth that you can learn more about it. Anthos has been designed from the ground up to manage hybrid resources, and we enable you to configure policies so that you meet the standards around your business continuity. That's been very key for us. Platform operators can logically separate workloads and teams, either using clusters or namespaces. The idea here is Kubernetes, as you start using it, you have to make important decisions around, do I create one cluster for all my teams? Do I have a cluster per team? Do I create a namespace per team? We're providing all the various tooling to enable you to make the choice. You have freedom of choice around what model works for you, but then define config across all these environments in a consistent fashion. And a common unified monitoring and logging service across your hybrid environments, really that minimizes the risk with exposing services. Now let's talk about the security team requirements. So Anthos allows you to run your workloads and have your data reside where you need it. And again, this is where DLP comes in, where you can classify your data and ensure that data doesn't end up in places it shouldn't. And then you can leverage existing CI/CD tooling to implement container supply chain and implement things like image scanning, binary authorization, and so forth across your container supply chain. And you get real-time visibility, right? Think of Istio as real-time monitoring for your services. You're getting real-time visibility and integrated logging across your services that are running in this hybrid environment. Now, the cool thing here is really around configuration management and centralized governance. So Anthos brings this notion of GitOps into reality. So you've heard from Rajay, for the last couple of years, they've been developing this environment, really, that's very GitOps driven. We want to bring GitOps to the masses, right? So that you can just take advantage of it from day one. And the idea here is really bringing to reality this whole notion of separation of concerns. At Google, we operate in a model where we have cluster operators, application ops, and security admins really operating independently, but working together. And we're bringing this model of separation of concerns so that administrators can define preventative policies that can be centrally defined and propagated across the hybrid environment. That's really key for us. So Anthos configuration management enables cluster, security, network admin teams to operate independently. and define configuration centrally. And configuration can be owned by these independent teams, and it really decouples the infrastructure and security concerns away from the development team. That's really the idea here. You can start small, you can have every team go and build out their own environment. You can define these policies and configs for each one of these environments, and then you can centrally govern them over time so that you're not introducing friction from the start. Developers are super critical for us. Our goal here is to enable developers to move fast. Really, when you think about it, Anthos is a platform for agile development. It's not, in a sense, opinionated to the point where developers can't do what they feel comfortable in doing, but it provides a framework to enable developers to interact with the rest of the broader team in a way that's frictionless. Right? And the idea is to enable developers to be able to deploy applications transparently into these multiple environments that look very different. And then finally, we have services that we've built at Google to really make the life of applications, DevOps, easier. Things like Cloud Build that are tightly integrated with our container supply chain. We provide these as add-ons for Anthos, but we'll work with any CI/CD tool that's there on the market to provide a great experience. And really the goal here is around consistency and ensuring that you're not spending time learning different tools for different environments.
So that sounds great. So let me just summarize what you've just kind of spoke to me about, is the fact that you're telling me that I can actually get rid of all the operational craft so that I can have a single pane of glass to manage both on-prem and in the cloud.
Yes.
Oh, that's so cool. And also that I can then just focus on the business value, which is basically what I'm being paid for. And I love the idea of the fact that I can segregate data. You've mentioned various ways that we can do that. And it gives me a solid foundation and room to grow, as Rajay showed us earlier. So this sounds great, but how do I get started?
Who wants to see a demo? Enough talk. Let's see some of this in action. So I'm going to invite the Duke up on stage to make this real.
Hi, everyone. My name's James Duke. I'm in our professional services group, nicknamed the Duke, like Allan says. I have the challenging task today of showing you what this would actually look like in practice. So Grace has told us, thank you for that, all of the problems that we see out there. We've heard from Rajay how Macquarie have solved this, and we've heard from Allan how CSP solves this. Let's see what that actually looks like in practice. So imagine the workflow. You are a financial services customer or business, which I expect a number of you out here are already. And you now want to roll out some kind of new service within your business, right? Whatever it might be. For the purposes of this demo, I'm going to use a demo which shows a very simple application, which is just grabbing data from the the Google PubSub API. Now, to actually release that, what might our GitOps process look like? Well, the first thing you would likely want to do is review and update your security posture and your guardrails that Rajay mentioned in order to accommodate that new application. So the place to do that is going to be in a repository. In this case, I'm going to use Google Cloud Source repositories to show you what that would look like. You would go in there, review and update and submit that change. At that point in time, any of the governance process that you have would run. We only have 10 minutes here, so I'm going to skip the asking my manager for approval. But in theory, you could put any of the workflows in there you want. Then those changes will then propagate out automatically into all of the fleet and all of the environments that are managed by Anthos. Finally, we can validate those changes are in place. And then finally, as we've mentioned here, profit. Right? At the end of the day, this is a tool to solve business problems. And so, in order to do that, what I'm going to show you is the use of a custom resource definition and accompanying controller. And what that does is, the CRD or custom resource definition, it allows me to define something that Kubernetes does not currently know about, or that Anthos does not currently know about. The controller then allows me to write the logic that translates that resource definition into something that Kubernetes understands. And it could be anything. For this case, what we're going to do is we're going to grant this app access to the outside world. And in order to do that, we will use an Istio rule. So along the top here, you'll see what it looks like conceptually, and in the bottom, you'll see what it is in practice. All right, if we could switch over the view, you'll see here I have a graph which is showing the traffic, the consumption from the PubSub API for this particular application. As you can see, it's effectively 0. The peak there is from this morning when I tested this demo. So what I'm going to do is submit an actual change. So you'll see here in the logs, deadline exceeded because the application is unable to access the API. I am going to push this change into my GitOps source of truth. And I'm going to add it. I'm going to commit. I'm going to call it allow access because that's exactly what it does. And then I'm going to push it into the source repo. Now, what that will do is take my custom resource definition and push it into my repository. Then Google's configuration management tool is going to pull that out of the repo and push it out to all of the clusters that are in scope. If I show you the CRD itself, we can see what it does. So, it is of type application security boundary. This is a custom type that we have defined, which specifies a set of application security boundaries. It's called Y, and it applies to the namespace deal app1. Imagine we're an FSI company. We have many, many different namespaces doing many different things. This particular namespace is for a particular type of application, which is brokering deals with third parties from a marketplace. And all I'm going to do is allow it access to Google APIs with protocol HTTPS and port 443. Then behind the scenes, config management is pushing this out. Now, if I refresh my logs, you will see now I have the received B, received hello 1, received hello 2. That's the traffic that is being pushed into this PubSub subscription. So now by pushing that one CRD into my Git repo, I have opened up just for that namespace access to that one particular set of APIs. Now this is Kubernetes, right? So we can use the hierarchy. We can specify a namespace. We could do it global. We can be quite specific about it. We can apply it to specific namespaces in specific security rings. So imagine now that this particular demo, there is an on-prem component. We've created the system in such a way as there are 2 security tiers, one of which encompasses on-prem and cloud, and one of which is just on-prem. So if I have those particular workloads that I know I can't push into the cloud, I can keep them in those namespaces which are security tiers which are only on-prem. Now, as you can see, that traffic is appearing, and as you can see, right on cue, the traffic is spiking. So that's a very trite example, right? Because all I've done is really, like for those of you familiar with Istio, what I've already done is create a service entry, right? However, think about this. That CRD is not limited to one thing. It can incorporate almost anything. So our goal here is to be able to write these templates and share them with you. If we could switch back to the slides, please. We will create a situation where we produce these templatized CRDs, which we will then publish to the world. And the idea is to solve Rajay's point. If they were going to do this a second time, how could we do it faster? How could we lean on Google to provide more of the best practices out of the box that I can consume very easily? So we would produce these templates, publish them in GitHub to the world, and they will allow you to very, very quickly bring these in and build on top of them and grow them, and to make your adoption, your migration to this process much, much faster. On top of that, Google Professional Services, which is the team I'm in, and our partner organizations are also putting together services packages so we can help with this process. So a combination of smart, trained people, I just call myself smart there, doesn't it? That sounds very bad. Everybody else who's really smart and me are able to deliver these projects with you by leaning on some of these templated CRDs. And our goal here is that this answers that question of what do we want from CSP, and this is what it would look like in practice. All right, thank you.
Thank you, James. So today we announced Anthos, and we invite you to come down the journey with us. If you're interested in evaluating it, test driving it, please reach out to your Google contact. We think it's going to be an exciting journey ahead, and we welcome your feedback, and we look forward to going down this journey with you over the next several months.